I'd like to introduce Russ Stavic. He was born and raised in South Dakota. That's why he's not a Green Bay Packer fan, because he didn't know anything about football when he was a kid. He attended the University of South Dakota, graduating with a degree in business. He spent his entire career with Armstrong World Industries in sales and customer service management positions. Upon retiring in 2015, he became involved as a volunteer with the Wolf Sanctuary of Pennsylvania and now gives guided public and private educational tours, along with other sanctuary duties, including feeding and watering the wolves and wolf dogs. From time to time, he also gives off-site sanctuary presentations. Russ has long had a fascination with wolves since his youth and devoured Jack London and Jack O'Brien and Zane Grey novels. The Wolf Sanctuary provides him with a perfect opportunity to continue his passion for wolf education and preservation. He's been married for 42 years and has 2 grown children. So I'll share my screen and hopefully I can get this running for him.
Thanks, Glenn. I appreciate it.
All right, go ahead, Russ.
Oh, perfect. I'd rather be there in person, but I appreciate you inviting me. And we're going to go through about 14 or 15 slides. There may be a blank slide around number 7 or 8, or it may be a slide of some wolves howling or something else. I was unable to pull it up on mine. But thanks for inviting us. Thanks for inviting me, I should say, Glenn. I've been looking forward to this. And before I get going, my wife, Joni, grew up in Arkansas, and her dad, Arch Glenn, in Fort Smith, Arkansas, started attending Rotary meetings in 1940. He attended Rotary meetings religiously up until 1995 when he passed away, and he had perfect attendance for 55 years. He won some kind of award for that, but there wasn't a week that would go by that he wouldn't attend a Rotary meeting. And that included when he was overseas in Europe, visiting his son, who also worked for Armstrong, and that's how I met my wife. Even when he was overseas and in Europe, he'd make a point to attend Rotary meetings. So he was very proud of his association with Rotary. And it's interesting that it started in 1925. He got involved, I guess, about 15 years later. As Glenn said, I spent my entire career with Armstrong in several different places across the country. And I began going up to the Wolf Sanctuary probably 10, 15 years ago, taking tours. And I said, hey, gosh, when I retire from Armstrong, I think this will be a good opportunity for me to give back and get involved in wolf education and wolf preservation. So it's a pretty special place. And many of you may have been here before or been to the Wolf Sanctuary. I think, Glenn, I know you've been there, because you indicated your son was involved, I think, in some Boy Scout projects to do some volunteer work. So we appreciate that. But I would encourage, and hopefully what we'll chat about for the next half hour will pique your interest where you may want to come and take a tour or get involved, because we are a nonprofit and we really don't get any federal assistance from the government. So as you can appreciate, the pandemic has really put a dent in our finances, but we made it through it, and we're gradually getting cranked back up with different types of tours. If you've ever been to Speedwell Lake, if you're ever around there around 7:30 or 8 and you're parked along the lake, roll your windows down and you'll probably hear the howling of wolves up on top of the hill, which is where our wolf sanctuary is, because we normally feed between 8:30 and 9. And between 7:30 and 8:30, the wolves are hungry, and there's usually a pretty gorgeous howling of wolves. A little bit of background on the property, because it's a pretty special place. And if you've been there, you'll understand that there are several old buildings on the property. And again, the address there is 465 Speedwell Forge Road. Well, the property dates back several hundred years ago, and a lot of the buildings that are still on the property date back to 1760, back when we were still a British colony. And we hadn't even declared our Declaration of Independence yet, 1776. A lot of history on the property. It was owned by a family, the Coleman family, specifically Robert Coleman, who made a lot of money in the mining of iron ore. And it eventually became a a horse farm. And back in the 1800s, a big form of entertainment up and down the eastern seaboard was harness racing, trotters. Toward that end, people would travel from all up and down the East Coast to see the trotters. Now, if you go to Google Planet Earth and type in the address 465 Speedwell Forge Road and play around with your mouse, you'll see a satellite image up on top of the hill of the remnants of a 1.5 mile racetrack. He also he had a daughter named Anne Caroline Coleman. The name really means nothing to really any of us other than that she had a mad crush on the 15th president of the United States, James Buchanan. Well, Robert Coleman said, I'm not going to have any of this. I don't want my daughter dating some lowly lawyer, some lowly attorney, so I forbid you to see James Buchanan any longer. Well, she was crushed and she moved to Philadelphia. And in 1817, she died, which she died from a heart disease. Many claim of a broken heart, but it was since been proven to be heart disease. And as a result, James Buchanan never married and was one of our few presidents that ever married. So obviously a good chance she spent a lot of time roaming on the property. Well, the Coleman family sold the property toward the end of World War II, 1944, to the Darlington family. And the Darlington family had one son. His name was Bill Darlington. Now, he has since passed away in the late 1990s, but he and his wife, Barbara, started this sanctuary around 1980. He attended F&M, a local liberal arts college, and where he majored in genetic engineering. And he had long had a passion for dogs and horses. And in around 1980, he acquired a wolf dog. And in a few minutes, we're going to chat about the difference between a pure wolf and a wolf dog, and for that matter, your dog at home. Because if you have a dog at home, you got a bit of a domesticated wolf, because all dogs evolved at one time or another from wolves. So he acquired this wolf dog, Malamute mix, incidentally, a Malamute, a Siberian Husky, and the Akita are the three breeds of domestic dogs with the closest physical characteristics to a wolf. So he acquired this Malamute mix. He named him Yukon Wolf. Yukon Wolf would expire about 8 or 9 years later after getting in a fight with a rabid coyote. But in 1981, about a year later, he gets a call from a lady in Harrisburg. And she said, Mr. Bill, can you help me? I've acquired a pure female gray timber wolf from northern Minnesota, out in the country where I grew up. And I can't keep her anymore because the laws, the rules, the regulations are starting to tighten and strengthen up and down the eastern seaboard. And to this day, in the states of New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, and Virginia, it is illegal to own a wolf or a wolf dog. There's a whole mismatch of laws with our various states. I lived in Texas for a lot of years. Every county has their own different laws, rules, and regulations pertaining to wolves and wolf dogs. Our daughter in Charlotte, it's legal in North Carolina to own a wolf dog, but not a wolf. In the state of California, it's wide open, as it is in Ohio. So there's a whole different mishmash of rules and regulations. So she said, Mr. Bill, I can't keep April. Would you take her? And he said, well, let me check into the laws, the rules, the regulations. And upon doing that, he said, you know what? I think I'm going to become a safe haven, a sanctuary, a safe place for misplaced, mistreated, and confiscated wolves and wolf dogs. So that was the genesis of our sanctuary. And our mission is twofold: to provide a lifelong safe haven for misplaced, mistreated, and confiscated wolves and wolf dogs, and also to educate the public about gray wolves, conservation, and biology, because they're a very misunderstood creature. They're not the ferocious werewolf, man-eating creatures that are so prevalent in so many books and films. I remember as a kid, and I'm old enough, dating back when I was in my youth in the 50s, one of my favorite fables was Peter and the Wolf. I don't know if any of you remember that fable. I understand they've since changed the ending of that fable, because in the original fable, these kids caught this wolf and they strung him up on a tree with his front legs forward and his back legs to the back, and these kids were sitting and swinging on him. So as a result, there's a lot of myths that have developed around wolves. If we could go on to the second page, Glenn. Okay, perfectly. So that was the genesis of our sanctuary. And if we fast forward to today, we have 57 wolves and wolf dogs at the sanctuary. And that breaks down into 27 pure gray wolves and 30 wolf dogs. Now, in North America, there are 2 species of wolves. You have the red wolf, highly endangered, less than a few hundred left in the wild, and you'll find them in eastern North Carolina, Canis rufus, the red wolf. Think of a small female German Shepherd weighing about 70 pounds with a bit more pointed ear than the gray wolves have, and that's species number 1. But the primary species of wolf in North America is the gray, Canis lupus, the gray wolf, and spelled with an A or with an E, the gray wolf. Of the gray wolf species, it's broken down into 5, basically 4 subspecies. Some claim 5, but it's basically 4 subspecies, starting with the timber wolf. When you think of a wolf or see a picture of a wolf on a Defenders of Wildlife calendar, many times you're going to see a timber wolf. The slide to the far left would be a timber wolf. And you have 2 of our, on the left is a wolf named Dozier, and on the right is Veda. Veda is a pure gray timber wolf, and Dozier, to her right, is a wolf dog. The 2 pictures in the middle are of 2 wolf dogs, and the picture to the right is of a pure wolf, and his name is Lincoln, and Lincoln's a pure wolf. Now, of the species, the 5 subspecies, again, you have the timber wolf on the far left. The second subspecies would be that of the wolf on the far right, Lincoln, and they are known as the plains wolves, buffalo wolves, prairie wolves, as Zane Grey would call them, and they roamed the Dakotas hundreds of years ago, following the migrating herd of buffalo for food and sustenance. You've all seen illustrations and drawings of the Native American Sioux or Cheyenne donning these wolf skins, wolf costumes, right down to having a fake skull on their head, which enabled them to get up close to the migrating herd of bison to kill the animal with their spear or bow and arrow. Because the buffalo didn't mind the wolves trailing along, because they served a purpose. They helped cull the herd of the sick, the weak, and the injured, and the ones that couldn't keep up. The third subspecies is the lobo, also known as the Mexican gray, and they resemble a timber wolf, like the 2 that you see on the far left, and you'll find them at altitudes of 4,000 feet and above in eastern Arizona, western New Mexico, and northern Mexico. Highly endangered. There's less than a few hundred of those left in the wild. The 4th subspecies is the Arctic tundra, and you'll find them in Northwest Territories, northern Canada, the Yukon, and up in Alaska. And they're typically silver and gray in color, and they tend to be the largest of the species of wolves. Wolves in general weigh between 70 and 170 pounds, but on average, including the wolves we have at the sanctuary, average between 90 and 120 pounds. The 5th subspecies resembles the timber wolf, and you'll find them in the northern Colorado area up the spine of the Rockies, and they're known as the Rocky Mountain wolf, also known as the Mackenzie Valley wolf. But they resemble the timber wolf, and as a result, many experts don't even classify them as a separate subspecies. So there's basically 5 subspecies of the gray. All the animals we have at our property are either pure gray or they are wolf dogs, which is a combination. Now, if we could move to the next slide, please. Now, if you look at these three pictures, it's fairly obvious that the dog is the one on the far right, and that's Phelan. Phelan is at our sanctuary, but not with our wolves. She was dropped off here along with another dog under the auspices that they were wolves or wolf dogs several years ago, but she's not. She's a dog. She would be a Siberian Husky mix. The animal in the middle, named Shawnee. Shawnee came from Virginia, was bred in Ohio, and her name is Shawnee, and she's a wolf dog. And on the far left is Loki. Loki was also born in Ohio, and he would be known as a plains wolf, a buffalo wolf. Now, when we get a newcomer to the sanctuary, typically they're going to come in a crate and on the back of a pickup or on the back of a flatbed. And Glenn, I need you to kind of keep me on for time and let me know when I'm kind of getting toward the end. When we get a newcomer, they're going to go into a quarantine area, and they're going to be in quarantine for usually about 3 months. The first thing we do when they enter quarantine is check them for any communicable diseases, especially parvo. Parvovirus would wipe out everybody we have up there within about 3 to 4 weeks. It's a slow, excruciating, painful death affecting their nervous system. Then we inoculate them with a cocktail of antibiotics, because anything your dog can get at home, a wolf can get, including rabies, distemper, etc. Then the third thing we do is do a saliva and a blood DNA test to determine their wolf content. And if they have no wolf content, or I should say just a very minuscule amount of wolf, which means they're basically a dog, we find happy, healthy homes for them. But if they have a significant content of wolf DNA in them, then we classify them as low, mid, or high content. Then the next thing we do is, and that's the most difficult thing, is integrating them into an existing enclosure. Wolves are extremely territorial, and a wolf pack in the wild usually averages between about 8 and 14 animals, and they're usually uncles, cousins, brothers, sisters. It's really an extended family, which even makes them more territorial. And an interesting statistic is, in the wild, almost half, 47% of wolf fatalities in the wild come from other wolf packs encroaching on their territory. So in the wild, wolves live typically between 5 and 9, on average 7 or 8. At our sanctuary, the average age is between 12 and 15. 2 weeks ago, sadly, we lost one of our old timers, Cinderella, and she was 18. The average age at our sanctuary is 12 to 15 because they're getting regular fresh food, water, and they don't need to worry about other wolves or wolf packs encroaching on the territory. So Glenn, if we could move on to the next territory. A little bit on wolf dogs. Sometimes people will adopt from a rescue organization, maybe a Siberian Husky, maybe a Labrador Retriever. We have a wolf dog on our property that if you saw him, you'd say, why do you have a black lab in here? Floppy ears, barks like a dog, but its wolf DNA is about 70 to 75%. So sometimes when people will adopt a Siberian Husky or a German Shepherd, they'll get the animal home and everything's fine. Behaves like a regular dog, sleeps up in bed with them, and there's really no difference in behavior. But at roughly 18 to 22 months with a wolf dog is when the rubber hits the road. When they reach sexual maturity, usually at about 22 months, that's when the wolf DNA will start to come to the forefront. Now, wolves in the wild profiled mankind thousands of years ago and said, we may be the apex predator on the planet, but there's one predator we fear, and that's the human being. So as a result, they're going to avoid us. So around 22 months, if it's got from a third to a half or more wolf content in that animal, that wolf DNA will begin to come to the forefront, and in essence, make them bipolar, where they wake up in the morning and they're really not sure if they're a wolf or a dog. and which makes them more dangerous than a dog or a wolf because they have been both from a domestication standpoint and a wild standpoint. All of a sudden, at around 22 months, they'll say that animal will begin to want to be outside more. It'll want to go to dog parks more often. And God forbid you put it in a crate, it'll almost pull its canines out, trying to pull the bungee cords to get off it. Well, at that time, the family are saying, gosh, something's changed in this animal. At that point, they'll take them to their veterinarian to maybe get some Prozac or something to settle the animal down. Now, to treat a wolf or a wolf dog or a wild feral animal, foxes, coyotes, wolves, badgers, you need what's classified as a wildlife vet, a veterinarian trained to work with wild feral animals. So the veterinarian, however, though, is because there's not a lot of difference between a dog and a wolf. From a DNA perspective, there's not much difference at all. A wolf has 42 teeth in their head. A dog has 42 teeth in their head. But the major difference is dogs have become domesticated, domesticated to be part of our world. So the veterinarian many times can tell from some physical characteristics that it might have some wolf content in. Does the animal stand with its feet slightly splayed apart? Are the ears a little more rounded with a little more fur in the ear? They can tell by some of the physical characteristics of the skull and of the jowl, but usually they'll end up doing a saliva and a blood DNA test. And if it comes back that it has wolf content, then it needs to either be surrendered to a sanctuary such as ours or euthanized. So the bottom line is wolves don't understand day-to-day schedules of human beings. The biggest thing that happens is in the morning, moms and dads would go off to work, kids go off to school, or at least used to, and all of a sudden this animal is left alone and at home, and it begins to suffer separation anxiety, which causes it to change its behavior. All of a sudden they're pulling the sheets off the bed or maybe the curtains off the windows, because that DNA in that wolf tells them if they were in the wild, they'd be together 24/7 with the rest of their wolf family. And what happens when they're left alone in the house, they feel abandoned by the rest of their pack, especially the alpha male and the alpha female. So if we could move on to the next slide, Glenn, please, thanks. Now, wolves are social creatures, and as I mentioned earlier, one of the most difficult things we do is integrating a newcomer into an existing territory because they're very territorial. What we do is we try to avoid twos. Now, if two have been raised together, that's not an issue. But if you have two wolves, we'll usually avoid trying to put a third wolf in with them because it's like sending your kids to college. 3 is usually a bad number. Someone's going to get bullied. So what we try and do is we try to match wolves from an age perspective. If we get a newcomer, we'll try to put that wolf in with another wolf or 3 or 4 that are sort of the same age. And we also like to try and maintain where one wolf may have a little more submissiveness and another one a little bit more dominant. We don't want to put 2 dominant wolves together. And we also try to put a male with a female and not for breeding purposes. Now, at the sanctuary, we have a license to breed, but we have not bred any wolves since the year 2007 because, again, we'd prefer to be a home for misplaced, mistreated, and confiscated wolves and wolf dogs. And we have them literally from all over the country, over a dozen states: Missouri, California, Montana, Iowa, Indiana, Wisconsin, Virginia, New York, Pennsylvania, just to name a few. So we put a male and a female together just because it seems to work a little better, and again, not for mating purposes. And what we have found is, and probably no surprise, when we put a male with a female, who do you think makes the determination as to whether or not that pairing is going to work? It's almost always the female. The male-female seems to be happy with any female he happens to be paired with. It's usually the female who's a little bit more discerning and will say after a few weeks or a month or so, hey, I don't particularly like this guy around here anymore. Get him out of here. So it's the female that usually makes the decision. Glenn, could you hit the next slide? And this is the one I'm a little unsure of. I thought it was a slide with either some wolves howling or a YouTube video of how wolves change river. It's a YouTube video, and it's what happened when wolves were reintroduced back into Yellowstone National Park in 1995. Now, I mentioned earlier that wolves are not the fairy tale monsters that many stories make them out to be. We like to say maybe that Little Red Riding Hood didn't tell the truth. And if you happen to see the movie with Liam Neeson, The Gray, typically when you see wolves in movies, like Dances with Wolves, etc., it's usually a wolf dog or digitalization, because a pure wolf, you cannot tame or train or love the wild out of a pure wolf. If you could tame or train a wolf, the Secret Service, the military, law enforcement would use a trained wolf instead of a dog. If you could move on to the next slide, please. And again, I kind of been watching watching the time here. Now, on the reason people typically will not have to worry about a wolf attack is wolves are canines and they're predators. They're much like lions. They're predators and they're carnivores. They're meat eaters. If you were in northern Minnesota or up in Canada today and you had a pack of wolves who were hungry, they'd be going after moose, elk, caribou. If you were in Africa and you had a pride of lions, incidentally, the lionesses do all the work in a pride of lions. They have the kids, raise the kids, do the hunting, and the big king of the jungle, male king of the jungle usually sleeps up to 18 hours a day. And if he's in a grumpy mood, will kill some of the kittens when they're born. But the type of prey animals that the lions would be going after would be wildebeest, gazelles, zebras, giraffes. Now, what those animals have in common to the prey animals that the wolves would be going after would be they're herbivores, they're vegetarian, plant-eating animals, and they're also known as ungulates. Growing up in rural South Dakota and doing a lot of farm work, I was around ungulates a lot, and an ungulate is a hooved animal. So typically, wolves and lions would be going after herbivores, and also known as ungulates. Typically, a predator will not kill another predator for food. They'll kill another predator to protect their kids and their home life. They're much like the great white shark in the ocean. You know, sharks don't go on land to bite people, and sharks don't breathe out of water. People don't breathe underwater. So when we're at risk, when we're in the ocean, from a shark bite is we have ventured into their kingdom. And it's no different from wolves in the wild. Wolves are going to avoid people. Again, they profiled us thousands of years ago and said, we really don't want anything to do with people. So if we don't do something foolish, like pulling little wolf pups or something out of a den, they're going to avoid us. But if we do something like that, or if the animal is rabid, that's when we could possibly be at risk. If you could move to the next slide, Glenn. Typically in the lower 48 states today, you have between 4,000 and 8,000 wolves still in the wild. Typically northern Wisconsin, Minnesota, out in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and the Pacific Northwest. You move up into Canada, you still have between 50 and 70,000 gray wolves in the wild. And you move up in Alaska, you have between 7,000 and 8,000 wolves. Let's move on to the next one, please, Glenn. Wolves are important to the ecosystem because they help control the elk and the deer populations. If you're interested, I'd encourage you to go to YouTube and Google how wolves change the course of a river, and you'll it explains what happened in Yellowstone when wolves, being the the keystone species returned to Yellowstone, and how it literally ended up in changing the course of a river. It's 4.5 minutes, and it's a beautiful video to watch. Could we go to the next one, please, Glenn? Caretaking at the sanctuary. I'd like to spend, I think you'll find this interesting, just a little bit of time on feeding, what we feed and how often we feed. We do not feed any dog food to our wolves or wolf dogs. That contains, dog food contains vegetables, and typically the diet of a wolf is 95% meat. Studies have been done at Voyager National Park in northern Minnesota by the University of Minnesota, and it's been proven that 3, 4, up to 5% of a wolf's diet are berries that they'll find on their territory. But typically, they're meat eaters. Now, if you think it's difficult putting food on the table for a family of 2, 3, or 4, we put food on the table for a family of 57 wolves. We prepare the meals 2, 3, 4 days in advance. Each meal is wrapped in white butcher paper with the name of the wolf and what the food is. Now, it's primary meat, sometimes poultry, sometimes fish. We do not have to buy any food. It's all donated. We'll either get it from hunters or roadkill deer. We're the first in Lancaster County that are called by the commission if they come upon a roadkill deer. But the biggest source of our food for our wolves come from food banks. From food banks where the food may be slightly out of date and they have to dispose of it. So we'll get the food and they'll get the tax donation and the write-off. Typically, each wolf gets between 2 and 5 pounds. Again, we write the name of the wolf on. In this case, you have on the far left, Levi. We'd say Levi, 4 pounds of beef with bone, or 4 pounds of horse without bone. Incidentally, horse is one of their favorite diet items. There's a lot of Amish obviously around. They'll contact us and say, we have a horse that we're going to put down. Would you be interested? And we'll say, sure. Now, we don't do any killing or slaughtering of the animals at our sanctuary. We do have a wolf kitchen with 3 walk-in freezers. We want the animal to already be dead when we get it, and it immediately goes into a freezer. We meticulously log and computerize what we feed because the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Pennsylvania Game Commission can stop in unannounced to check our records as to what we're feeding. Typically in the winter, when their metabolism is running a bit higher, we'll feed 6 days a week. We'll usually fast our wolves 1 day a week, and that's today, Friday. In the summer, we'll cut back a little bit because their metabolism is not quite as fast, and they're a little bit more lethargic with the hot weather. So we'll feed 4 or 5 days a week, but on the off days when we don't feed, we'll give our wolves treats. And treats can consist of deer legs or what we call bloodsicles. If we get an animal that still has an ample supply of blood, a cow or a horse, we'll drain the blood, put it in ice cube trays and freeze it. And that provides a tasty, crunchy treat for our wolves. Next slide, please. And I hope I'm not going too fast. Normally, my presentations, when I'm doing offsite presentations, it's about 36 to 40 slides, and it's about an hour and a half, but I feel I'll at least be able to give you sort of an overview of what we do and what we care and how we care for our animals. Again, for the most part, we're all non-paid volunteers. We all share a passion for wolf education and wolf preservation. And if you could move to the next slide, Glenn, please. And again, we rely on donations or perhaps visiting us and taking a tour. We offer public tours on Tuesday, Thursday, with the exception of yesterday, and Saturday. Group tours usually are about 15 people. And we also, and they're $15 for an adult, $14 for a senior citizen, and 13 for a child. And I think we also have a special discount for military veterans. And we also offer private guided tours at $45 a person. I'll have a private tour tomorrow with 2 people. So I've covered an awful lot of ground in a few slides, but I understand that our wolf sanctuary is second only to Sight and Sound as the most popular tourist destination, but yet it's a hidden secret. I'll bet half the population of Lidditz, 10 minutes away, have never visited the sanctuary. I've met people that live in that area that have heard the wolves howl, and they've never visited us. So if you're looking for something kind of special to do, or you got some relatives from out of town coming in, I'd encourage us to go online and check us out. So I appreciate the time. I know I'm up around 1:15. So if there's any last minute questions, or if you have time, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anybody have any questions?
Kind of went a little too fast there, I think, in some instances, but I think you got a good overview of what we do at our wolf sanctuary.
Question about fixing, if the wolves are fixed when they live there, and
Good
if
question.
fixing them would help diminish that wild behavior when
To a
they're
certain
pups.
extent, that's an excellent question, Brenda. And I failed to mention that. We neuter all the males typically between about 12 and 15 months, I should say. And typically we spay the females at around 18 months to 24 months. It's a little dicier. It's a little trickier procedure. There was a time, Brenda, when we did not spay the females because we figured if we neutered the guys, that would solve that problem. But what we found is with many of the female wolves who hadn't been spayed, when they got to be about 7 or 8 or 9, how do I gently say this? They became quite cranky, very cranky. So by spaying them, that took a little of the enthusiasm out of them, you might say. But excellent question.
Thank you very much, Russ. We are at the end of our time, and we really appreciate the info. Fascinating, fascinating. Everybody have a great weekend. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks a lot, Russ.
Thank you
Appreciate
again
it.
for inviting me, Glenn. I appreciate
betcha.
it.
Thanks.
Thank you.